Welcome to the first edition of Quarantine Conversations here on the RHCC High School podcast. You could be listening or watching this one because we are hopefully filming the Skype or the FaceTime, but if not, I'm calling David in. David Krall, our first guest, who has been quarantined at home for, I think, 33 years at this point.
Yep. I've never left the house.
How's it been, man?
It's been weird, man. I think the speed at which everything has changed has been part of the adjustment and the disruption. Just like a few days ago, you're thinking, oh, maybe this is the new normal. 4 to 8 hours later, you might be living in a completely different reality as isolation and quarantine continues to happen, and you kind of see it as it moves across the world and the country. So that, I think, has been part of just kind of trying to figure out what is the new norm.
Yeah.
What does life look like moving forward?
How has it been at home for you? Because is Kelsey home?
Yeah, man. So we have quite the setup. We have Kelsey and I are both in our bedroom working together, both working from home. They sent everybody from Biola home, which is where Kelsey works. And then we have our 2-year-old Jackson, 6-month-old Xander with a nanny out in the kitchen, in the living room. Sometimes they're napping, one in the bedroom, one literally in the living room with a nanny kind of hanging out with them. So it's a packed house, but we're kind of making it work.
Is social distancing just not happening in your home these days?
Not in the household. No social distancing in the household, but we've been trying to be real careful from being out and about and around other people. So
when was the last time you went outside?
About 15 minutes ago.
So you haven't?
No, I had to swing by church yesterday, but that was the first time all week
Wow.
that I had been in there. I guess since Monday afternoon.
Wow.
So just kind of cooped up at home like a lot of other people are, and kind of figuring out what we do now. So
how do you explain this to your kids?
They have no idea, which we just keep telling Jackson things are closed. He has a little bit, I think, of an idea that something's different because we're home, and we're like, sorry, bud, the playground's closed.
Right.
The mall is closed. Like,
does he go to the mall often?
Well, we're pretty close to it, so we just drive over there, and it's a good, like, open enough space that he can run around without causing a lot of damage,
right,
but still feels somewhat contained until he's running off towards an escalator or something like that, and we have to, like, track him down.
That's worse than coronavirus.
Yeah, pretty much. So, so it's been all right, man. I think it's just your life has been disrupted.
Yeah.
In significant ways, which is a challenge and an opportunity.
That's the word I keep using, is disruption. I cannot think of a time in history where, like, Coachella and the stock market are both experiencing the same type of disruption. Do you know what I mean? Like when you have to cancel graduations and push back Stagecoach from the same problem,
right?
Something's up.
Yep.
So how have you experienced that in your home?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think the disruptions have been partially with just work, is a big one, trying to figure out kind of what that looks like now moving forward. And really just kind of what does ministry look like? And really the core of that question is just what are people experiencing and what do people need right now during this time? And trying to think through really what is the way of Jesus during the midst of a crisis like this?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It provides significant challenge, and it also, I think, provides significant opportunity for God to work in our hearts. I've just been thinking about that in my own life. I could even feel the slowed down life and the disrupted life the last few days, this last weekend. Just things, like you said, things being canceled, whether that's kind of the sports world being canceled, whether that's events that were on the calendar being canceled. We're just in closer quarters with one another, and suddenly you have almost more time and less time,
right,
kind of all in the same experience, because it feels like there's a lot less things you can do, but at the same time, you're kind of opened up in this new way to a new kind of type of life. So trying to adjust to that and figure out really what that looks like now. Which I'm hopeful that this in my own life means more openness and being with God in the midst of this. I think there's a huge opportunity for that this is kind of some forced Sabbath, that this is some forced disruption. I mean, really, us being stripped away of all of our distractions. In some sense, there's more noise, but there's also less noise. It kind of depends what you do with all that now. But really, this being a chance, an opportunity to listen to God, a chance to be with God more deeply, a chance to be present with family and relationships more deeply, which I think is what God really wants to do and work in our hearts. So I'm trying to ask that question now kind of each day of just, God, what do you have for me today in the midst of this disruption?
That's huge. And I think that's where we're pushing our students too. And also, the high school team in general. Like I've been saying in the office, like, this is the only time in history where we've never been able to do ministry this month. March is usually low in programming, but usually we're able to do stuff impact and crash course and stuff. And we're canceling everything. And, on the one hand, that's a pretty negative thing, but on the other hand, that's a really unique opportunity to really push students into a new rhythm. And I really hope that some of the things that come out of this are life lasting, that students find new life, new rhythms. I always joke with Megan. I say, like, how have you been in quarantine? And she says, I'm finding myself in a new way. And I think that's really, really good. What have you been reading or doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Part of, I think, the tension and part of, I think, the process of really God working in our hearts here is turning off the noise. Because in some sense, a lot of noise has been turned off, but there's all this new noise, tracking what's happening around the world. You can kind of just have nonstop news, even just more engaged over social media and just content from all directions. And it's been a discipline trying to even just practice this myself. I need to turn that off. Although I'm curious about what's going on, although I actually have some fear and anxiety that I feel almost like, well, let me just look at one more tweet. Let me just look at one more news article. Let me just see one more piece of information. Turning that off and be like, okay, God, I'm going to sit with your word. I'm going to sit and pray with you. How do I really encounter you during this time? And I think in that moment is the real opportunity to, in some sense, you're just trying to do what we're trying to do every day.
Right.
It's just a lot more intensified, and it just now looks different. There was a C.S. Lewis quote where he says, how you respond to an interruption is who you actually are.
That's great.
And I think this disruption is revealing our hearts. And Jesus wants to do some pruning, and he wants to do some chopping down of some certain things and cutting off of some certain things so that new things can grow during this season that really will prepare us, I think, for what God has next for us after COVID-19.
Yeah. How has your life group been in this season?
Yeah, so we've been trying to figure out what that looks like church-wide. Our group hasn't yet met because a lot of people have young kids, and so juggling that over Zoom would be really difficult. But I know quite a few groups have met just kind of over video conferencing, and we've been staying just connected via text and checking in with people. How are you doing? What's going on? How are people just responding and different real needs that are happening too, as a lot of people are changes in their income and a lot of financial implications to all of it. And so really just trying to care for each other well and remaining connected even though we're, isolated a lot more now.
Yeah. Dude, it's huge. How have you been encouraging people to fight against isolation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think something I was thinking about a little bit over the last couple of days I think the difference between isolation and solitude is connection. And so isolation can be something that's really scary.
Right.
If there's loneliness that goes along with that, if there's a sense of I'm now feeling all this fear and anxiety and I'm alone in it. But what you have to do is stay connected.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between isolation and solitude.
Right.
It's connection with God and connection with other people. And so that is a small but significant difference, because being alone can be joyous experience.
Right.
It can be a life-giving experience. Yeah, I just was reading how Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to a lonely place and prayed. And so in the midst of all this kind of craziness in the Jesus' external world, he was continually pulling away into the wilderness. And in a lot of real ways, we're now in this new wilderness.
Right.
But it wasn't this place of disconnection for him. It was this place of connection to God. It is actually what fueled his ministry. It's what filled him up to send him back out. And so, and Jesus actually, just as his ministry was getting started, went into the wilderness for 40 days. Yeah. And he encountered Satan there. He encountered real temptation, which is a big part of this that I don't even feel like a lot of people have talked about yet. But Satan obviously trying to use something like COVID-19 to come against the kingdom of God. But how will we face a real enemy in our own hearts and lives in the midst of this? I think a lot of that can be fear and anxiety, and a lot of that could be isolation and loneliness. But so there will be this spiritual battle that will happen for our hearts in this disruption. And the question is, will we be connected with God? And will we abide and remain in Jesus, which is how Jesus overcame Satan in the wilderness. And it actually prepared and sent him out into his ministry. Or will Satan continue to win those battles? And so there's a real spiritual battle that I think will happen here in the wilderness. And the question is, how do we remain and abide with Jesus, being connected with God? So that isolation isn't desolation. It isn't loneliness. It isn't disconnection. It isn't I'm stuck alone with my fears and anxieties, but it's I'm connected to God. I'm with other people during this time.
That's great.
So, yeah.
That's really good. You said something, Satan using COVID-19. How do you imagine that God's going to use COVID-19?
Oh, man. Yeah. I truly believe that out of crisis comes renewal, and out of crisis comes revival. And so there is crisis happening now, which is disruption, but that is truly opportunity. And that's opportunity individually. That's opportunity in our community. Just to think about what everybody is thinking about right now.
Right.
How do we love each other? How do we care for each other? How is this an opportunity for the gospel? Those are the things that we want and hope that we think and pray about all the time, but we're often just so distracted. So I think there's a huge opportunity in this for the gospel to spread, for God to build his kingdom, as his kingdom is a kingdom that lasts forever, that never fails, that never suffers, that doesn't rise or fall with COVID-19.
Yeah.
And I really think in that we're all aware of how finite and weak we are right now, more than ever before.
Yeah.
The reality of
mortality is just like right in front of us right now.
Oh yeah, our mortality of wow, there is an invisible sickness that could take me out right now. My life is finite.
Crazy.
Our financial institutions aren't nearly as firm as we thought they were. Our social structures, Coachella, concerts, restaurants, movie theaters, all of that being stripped away from us. And so when we hit that wall is when God works and has an opportunity to do something in our life. So we're hitting that wall, the whole entire world right now.
And it's universal. It's universal. Like an equalizer, right?
Yes.
Everybody is feeling this, and everybody is home and trying not to be out. And so, David, I'll let you go back to spending time working or being with your family. Man. But last question I want to ask everybody in these quarantine convos is, what's one thing, entertainment-wise, that you're recommending people watch, listen to, read while they're at home waiting for the quarantine to be lifted? What's one piece of quarantine content you want people to enjoy?
That is a great question. Okay. Can I give you two?
Please.
Okay. One you're going to be really familiar with. This is even just where I'm going right now. John Mark Comer, Bridgetown Church. He has these 5-minute podcasts that are just bite-sized things to chew on and marinate. I think those type of things fuel your mind in a direction of trust, rest, peace in Jesus in the midst of this is huge, because there's an opportunity to be a non-anxious, restful presence to your friends and family.
Totally.
And that is what Jesus has for us. That is truly what he has for us. Rest, peace, trust in him. And so that's Bridgetown Church, John Mark Comer, 5-minute videos. Chew on those. I think that'll really fuel your soul. From a pure entertainment perspective.
This is what I want right here.
Let's see. I mean, Kelsey and I started Parks and Rec. We skipped season 1. Not started.
You shouldn't skip season 1. Season 1's great.
Season 1's great, but we just were like, they're just trying to figure out the characters still in season 1. So we jumped into season 2 and have kind of been going through that. We watched Survivor last night. That's still running after about 45 years.
I think it's been 110 years. I think you're right.
It's been a lot.
Yeah.
So
Survivor, Parks and Rec. You got to
Yeah.
just turn off the brain. And it's funny about Survivor, like you're watching other people try and survive, and I bet like there's a part of you that's like, it might come down to this. Like it might come down to me building a fire and asking someone for rice. And so
Survivor is a prediction of what's going to happen.
I hope not. I pray and I hope not. But anyway, David, thanks so much for calling in and being the beta test of Quarantine Conversation. Stay safe in there, and we'll hopefully connect when the world lifts this and we can go back to enjoying Coachella.
We'll do, man.
See ya.